Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small businesses and good stories in general. Welcome to today's episode of Small Business War Stories. Have you ever wondered what would you do if you were caught in a bad situation? Let's say that somebody in your family were injured, or you are in the wilderness and you break a leg, or God forbid you're in a terrible situation where there are shots fired. What would you do? How do you handle that? That's a question that I asked myself before I took a course from Atomic Legion. And today on the show I have Justin Hurzeler, who is one of the partners of Atomic Legion, and they teach regular people like you and I what to do in situations that are really difficult and how you can be an asset and not a liability to the ones that you love. Now, Justin is a very, very impressive, has a very impressive resume. He actually goes out and with the SWAT team and SWAT calls as a first responder. He is a medical responder, so he goes out and does response to 911 calls for people. So, he has a tremendous amount of a wealth of knowledge, and we talk about the psychology of how these skills can be used for everyday life, and how he is running Atomic Legion as a side business while also having his full-time job as a first responder. So that's something that's come up in the podcast before. How do you do that? Like, what are the trade-offs of what you gain and what you give? It's a great episode. Do check us out on our website at smallbusinesswarstories.com. We would love to hear your feedback. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Justin Hurzeler of Atomic Legion in Austin, Texas. And we're live here in beautiful Austin, Texas. And today I have the pleasure and honor to sit down with Justin Hurzeler, who is one of the partners at Atomic Legion, which we will find out here in a minute. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So you and I met at Atomic Athlete, and Todd, one of the partners there, has been a guest on the show in the past. And you are a beastly athlete who's a great inspiration to not just me, but other folks as well.
Merely average in the context of Atomic Athlete.
That is a tremendous amount of sandbagging. So sandbagging is not allowed on the show. You are beastly strong. You've always been an inspiration to me, certainly. And I'm really interested to learn more about what you do, because Atomic Legion is kind of an offshoot of Atomic Athlete. It's associated, but it's not the same thing. So what is Atomic Legion? How did you get started with that?
Well, it was born really out of a project that Atomic Athlete started several years ago called Vanguard, which involves 4 days out in the woods every year with around 50 people who show up. And it's a series of small classes, usually 60 to 90 minutes long, on a whole range of subjects, just to make yourself more sufficient and or capable. You know, the subjects include things like martial arts, knife fighting, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, but we also get into like rappelling, butchering wild animals, medical response, and then we do an obstacle course, and it's a great community of people that come out for it, and a really good time. And so we were trying to think of ways to broaden that and make it accessible in a more sort of universal range on a more regular basis.
So it's like zombie apocalypse camp.
Sort of, yes.
I'm half joking, but in
Yeah.
the sense that it's like skills that were really important for mankind in general, or humankind, I should say, in general, over our evolution over 2 million years, that have probably only been lost in the last 100 years.
Yeah,
is my guess.
If that,
Yeah, and we take stuff for granted. We go to the store and there's like packaged meat. And,
Absolutely.
We don't rely on our legs necessarily to move from point A to point B.
Yeah. So the idea behind Legion was that not only would we offer classes that we were capable of teaching, but also that we would try to network with other instructors who teach other things, so that we could bring that and offer that to an audience.
Yeah.
I mean, the original vision and I think the ongoing vision is that in addition to things like firearms and martial arts and medical, we would also find a guy who knows how to recognize wild plants that are edible and do a class on that. We've done a couple classes on land navigation, a class on emergency long-range communications and things like that. The whole idea and the inspiration for me, the motivation for me rather, was always stemming from a place of wanting to be useful to others and wanting to not be helpless in a crisis.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the person who's just standing there frozen in fear while something bad happens.
Yeah.
Whether it's a violent action or a medical injury or, being lost in the woods, you want to be able to help.
Be useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and got so many questions. But, I mean, one of the things that's worth mentioning here is that, so you are one of the partners of Atomic Legion, but on top of that, you also are a first responder, right?
Correct, yes.
So what's your day job, quote unquote?
So I'm a full-time 911 advanced life support paramedic, which means that I do 24-hour shifts on an ambulance. It's 24 on, 48 off, unless I'm picking up overtime. And then on top of that, I'm also attached to a special operations medical team formed of tactical medics. So we deploy out with SWAT. There's several SWAT agencies that we work with, and we go with them on high-risk warrants, anything that they get called out to, as well as attending all of their training, and basically make ourselves experts in trauma medicine and
so,
tactical environments.
In other words, you've seen some stuff.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff.
Yeah. How does it affect you?
Insidiously. I always thought that I would be wrestling with sort of overt emotional and psychological scars from this job, and I find that actually it's more of a creeping kind of oozing in your brain that over time can become really dangerous. So I try to stay very, very conscious and aware of it and talk through it as often as possible. When appropriate, I get counseling and things like that, because otherwise it starts to come out in really weird ways that I don't expect. Irritation, impatience, and things like that.
Yeah.
Crying at weird times.
Yeah. Well, no, I bet. I mean, if you're going to be part of 911 responders and SWAT teams, it's a side of humanity that is for most of us something you read about in the news, and it's part of your everyday life.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of people on their worst day.
That's is that something that you guys say? That's no,
really I just thought of that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty accurate. Now, what's powerful is that you are taking all this experience and all the things that you do, and you are helping other people be as much of an asset as possible in these situations, right? Have you seen? I mean, can you recall? And I want to get into the details of the Vanguard a little bit more because, and actually, sadly, I was signed up to go this last year, and unfortunately,
I know, we missed you.
I know I had some circumstances that were beyond my control.
Sure.
It was the beginning of a pretty dark few months there, but we're on the other side of that, so I'll be there this year.
Good.
But I'd love to hear a little bit more. Actually, let's talk about the Vanguard first, and then I want to ask you about how I want to see what types of transformations do you see in people? Because I think a lot of times you get these self-imposed limitations, right? Oh, I'm just not that kind of person. I am not blank, right?
Right.
Which are really just made up walls that we all put up for ourselves. So I'd love to hear, maybe after you go into a little bit more detail about the specific things that you do at the Vanguard. What kind of transformations have you seen in people?
Well, I think maybe the best initial illustration I could give for that is my significant other. Just a wonderful woman, grew up in Minnesota, grew up very, very liberal, as I did. and was very anti-firearms when we met, which was many years ago. And I am by no means a firearms fetishist. I don't collect firearms, but I've always, at least while living in America and having access to firearms, made myself as capable with them as I could. So her fear of firearms and her stance against them obviously had a very rational side, which I think we're all sort of cognizant of and we think about a lot in America, but also had a very sort of subliminal, trepidatious side, which was mostly born of not being familiar with firearms, being afraid that a gun could go off at any moment, without any provocation. And so...
Turns out they're not designed that way.
Right, yeah. It turns out they're, like anything else, a tool, you know. A tool which can be dangerous, absolutely, in the wrong hands, and can very much be misused.
Yep.
But by gradually familiarizing her with firearms and taking her out shooting and teaching her about firearm safety and stuff, she's now very comfortable with firearms and actually really enjoys shooting a lot. Doesn't necessarily mean she's going to carry every day or think that she needs a gun for that, for day-to-day life, but was exemplary in my mind of like, well, if somebody thinks they are just not wired for something, but then is exposed to an environment where in a comfortable surrounding with a supportive community, they can become familiar with it, at least somewhat, it may open them up to things that they would not have otherwise suspected.
Right.
And the Vanguard was in many ways born of that. Initially, it was conceived by our friends at Atomic Athlete as like a man camp, a chance for a bunch of guys to get together in the woods and just do stuff that they have fun doing. But it very quickly surpassed that notion and became instead a chance for people of reasonably like mind to come out and be exposed to these different things.
And a lot of women come out too.
Yeah, a lot of women come out. And we're absolutely supportive of that. I would miss them if they weren't there. Too much testosterone makes me a little itchy. So. And so that's what the Vanguard provides for people. And we've designed it specifically so that people who are coming from perhaps a misplaced sense of motivation to learn those things won't necessarily feel comfortable in the environment that we provide, if that makes sense.
Okay, tell me more about that. I think I know what you mean, but tell me more what you mean.
So, for example, with Atomic Legion, when we decided to create Atomic Legion and start offering classes along these lines in different areas, we were all there's three of us who run it, three partners, and we're very definite in our stance of we do not want to cultivate a fear mentality in people, right? We do not want to advocate paranoia in people's lives. They don't need to be ready for ISIS to attack in the Walmart parking lot at any moment. That's not conducive to a good life or a good community. All we want to do is offer them a chance to become more capable, more useful, more of an asset to both themselves and the people around them, and to help them avoid circumstances where they would be just a frozen spectator at a disaster.
Right.
And so the Vanguard also is built around that, and not around a sense of you need to come out so that you can be more badass or, better at defending your family. Things like that. All of that is true, but those are sidebars to living a full life. I feel like
I've seen that there is that side of the firearms community, and like
absolutely.
And I don't know. I almost feel like you almost by focusing on that, it's almost like inviting it, right?
Absolutely.
It's like a weird.
I'm a strong believer that you at least play a pretty major role in creating your destiny on a day-to-day basis. So if you are going out of your house with the mentality that like I could be attacked at any moment, I have to be aware of my hazards and all of that is still true. Situational awareness is important. Safety is important. Taking care of yourself is important, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the world's out to get you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, it's a side conversation about firearms and carry. Because I have a concealed carry permit, but I don't often carry. The reason I got it is exactly what you said, because I was also very wary of guns and didn't understand them. And once you start to understand them as a tool, you're like, yeah, it's a really dangerous tool. It's kind of like a chainsaw.
Sure.
It's understanding it kind of takes away some of the fear of it, and it's like, okay, this is what this does.
Right.
It's really dangerous, and it's also harnessable and learnable.
Right. And I mean, that conversation could go on for another 2 hours. I talk to people all the time who know what my primary job is with the Spec Ops team, and I try to convey to them that their notion that America is better off for having ready access to firearms, and therefore things that we see happen in other countries wouldn't happen here, that notion is probably misconceived, and if implemented would most likely result in more catastrophic loss of life than they would even really think of,
Yeah. I mean, God, that is a wormhole, a rabbit hole that is really, really deep. So let's focus a little bit more. So that's one of the skills you teach.
Sure.
I also took a class with you that was an all-day class, which is outside of the Vanguard. It was on a Saturday at Atomic Athlete, which was about basically trauma first response, right? So you taught me how to use a tourniquet. You taught me how to pack a wound. You taught me like how to triage and figure out like what the first course of action is. It was about a year ago. I hope that I remember enough of it. I do carry a tourniquet in my truck, so that's I guess that's at least one thing that's more. But there's a bunch of other aspects of this that are like really important that we don't think about every day, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. Have you seen transformations in how people are more comfortable with helping others in situations that are really difficult?
Absolutely. One of the turning points at Vanguard a few years ago was we had a friend of ours from Atomic Athlete attending Vanguard, somebody you also know, and this person was really, really trepidatious about heights. And of course, there's an evolution at Vanguard where we rappel off a 100-foot tower.
100 feet is a lot of feet.
It's a lot of feet.
Yeah.
And it took probably at least 2 hours for this person to work up the nerve to even come up to the top of the tower, let alone, think about going off on a rope. And I know inherently, what that phobia feels like. Every time I go off a tower, I always have a little bit of, pucker. And so watching this person work through all of that and finally take that step to step over the rail and initially go outside of the tower on the rope, because that's the biggest part. The hardest part is always that first step, and watching them work through that was unbelievably inspiring for me, for everybody else there, and of course for this person too, and they still talk about it to this day. Yeah. Whenever we chat about things like that. And so those kinds of transformations are absolutely a fundamental part of our goal. And when I teach the medical classes, I've had the good fortune to have students come back to me and tell me stories of things that happened to them after the med class that they felt they either were far more useful in rendering aid, or at least were far more centered in dealing with the situation, because it was no longer such a foreign thing. They didn't feel helpless. Even as a trained paramedic, there are lots of situations that I still know I can't do anything about, but finding a place where you can at least be in yourself and do what you can in those situations is important. And that's what I see a lot of people get out of coming through those classes. They may never be in a situation where they have to put a tourniquet on somebody. I hope they're not. But all of those skills that we teach are applicable across such a wide range of potential crises, traffic accidents, wilderness injuries, domestic injuries, not always just the shootout in the convenience store scenario that everybody kind of conceives of,
Yeah. And my guess is that most of the applications of tourniquets actually don't have anything to do with shooting anybody. They're like, you break a leg or a car accident and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. And in fact, if I just got back from a special operations medical conference that they hold on an annual basis, and I always go to. And they looked at wounding patterns in civilians in active shooter events in America. And very, very few of those people involved in those scenarios would have been saved by a tourniquet, right? Because people tend to shoot at the biggest target, which is the torso or the head, right? So, whether a tourniquet may serve you in a horrible disaster like that or not, who knows?
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to that knowledge that now you are familiar with something, and therefore you are going to be more capable of being calm and collected and objective in a disaster, and more capable of looking at your options and doing hopefully the one that is the most constructive.
Right. Right. And also, I think having thought about these things also makes you more aware, right? So for me, that's what jiu-jitsu did for me, right? So after 7 years of training and getting a purple belt, it's like you learn to recognize how people move and who actually means harm, who's just talking, and then avoid situations before they ever happen, right? And that's the biggest thing. It's not about going out and beating people up. It's about having that awareness of and understanding what you're like in combat, because most of us are not aware of what we're like in combat.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. The first time you end up in a confrontation and your adrenaline goes through the roof, and if you're not familiar with that feeling, you're going to go to pieces.
Oh yeah, you're going to go virtually blind. Actually, they've done studies on this, right? We actually you don't see.
Yeah. You get tunnel vision. You get auditory exclusion.
Yeah.
Dave Grossman has a couple of really great books on it. Showing what happens when the heart rate reaches certain levels.
Oh yeah. What are they called?
One is called On Combat.
Okay.
And one's called On Killing.
Wow, that's some intense titles.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's Dave Grossman? I'm not familiar.
He's a colonel in the military, and he did a lot of psychological studies on everyone from military to law enforcement agents and others, and what happens to people physiologically and psychologically in those situations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the business side of this a little bit. So
Sure.
It's interesting for me because you are in a very special situation. We have all kinds of different businesses on this show, right? So we have some businesses that are currently small businesses that are trying to get as big as possible, as fast as possible. There are other businesses that are brand new, like some of the folks from the gym, right, have been on the show right at the point where they're taking it full time. Then there are other people who have worked up the courage to leave their day jobs, and they've been going on for a while, but they love doing what they do and they're okay with doing that. You are in a very special situation. We've had some guests like this, where you have your regular full-time job, right? You don't depend on Atomic Legion to be your main source of income, but it is a source of income, and it is something that really matters to you. How do you balance that, and how does that work? Because I think a lot of people sometimes struggle with they think that there's again, the barriers we put up for ourselves, right? Oh, I have my regular job. I don't have time to do my,
Sure.
insert the blank here, thing that I really care about doing. And you're doing it. So let's, maybe share a little bit more about what that's been like and what have you learned?
I should point out first that I am probably by any standards somewhat of an inherently lazy person.
Okay. Not based on what I've seen. But.
So, I love my primary job, and I get a lot of fulfillment out of my primary job. And in addition to that, it's a pretty decent paycheck with good benefits and a good retirement plan. Whether or not I stick with it through until retirement, we'll see. But Legion, I don't think for any of us was conceived as something that would, at least in the early years, be a main source of income. It was conceived more as something that we could use to enjoy teaching the things that we love to teach, as well as sort of a side income kind of deal. We didn't invest any money in it from the get-go. It was all based purely on education and things like that. So we didn't have a lot of product or overhead. And because I have access to, or we have access to the Atomic Athlete gym space, as well as, ranges here in town and stuff like that, we have we weren't worried about facilities. There was and still is a lot of talk about where we go in the future and whether or not we need to invest in facilities, invest in other products that will enhance the experience of the audience coming to us. From my standpoint, I'm the primary instructor for the rappelling and for the medical. The medical is somewhat of a unique problem for me because it's very important to me, and it's things that I really want people to know and to feel comfortable with. I feel that it should be mandatory training in high school. There's also resources out there, some of which I help coordinate, that are free. You can go take a Stop the Bleed class that's about an hour to an hour and a half long for an introduction into hemorrhage control techniques. So I'm constantly having to differentiate between, if someone takes a Stop the Bleed class, what am I offering that is of greater value and therefore worth paying for? Because I would love to offer this stuff free all the time, but I can't.
Right.
My time is valuable, and in order to provide people who participate in my class the experience that I think they need, it does require some monetary investment, which then requires a paying customer. So I'm constantly trying to figure out where that line is between sort of public education that should be free and readily available to people and slightly more specialized and enhanced education, which I offer, and which other people in other areas of the state and the country also offer. And some of them probably do it better than I do. But so right now, I would say that, as a small business, it's almost at the hobby level, where it's something that we're not constrained to have a regular schedule. We would probably be growing a lot faster if we did.
Yeah. Have you thought about doing that?
We have. I think for at least two of us out of the three, and probably all three of us.
So who are the others? So Jake's one of them, right?
Jake Sines,
Jake
the
Sines,
founder of Atomic Athlete, is one of them, and Alex Acosta is the other.
He's the firearms guy.
Mm-hmm. And Alex is now competing at a very high level in national shooting competitions and things like that. And he's a phenomenal instructor. And Jake also is just an amazing instructor, and he teaches everything from firearms to land navigation and things like that. And then we also hold events every month or two that are essentially shooting competitions, but not in the sense of the traditional competitions that people see out there. They usually have a twist or an element that adds extra stress or physical strain and things like that.
It's different to shoot a pistol after you've done a bunch of burpees.
Oh, yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
So because we're not constrained to a fixed schedule, it allows us the latitude to kind of do it when we want to do it. Because of that, also, if we continue to operate on that modality, it will probably stay at the level that it's at.
How many classes do you offer per year? So you have the Vanguard, which is a big 3-day event, and then how many classes do you offer on average?
Usually, I try to offer 1 to 2 med classes every 2 months.
Okay.
And that's just based on the audience that we have out there now. I've tried a few different things, including flyers, online marketing at a small level, and networking with other businesses to try and increase that audience. But it's had somewhat limited return at this point. So until we decide to take it up a notch and either pay somebody to market for us or something along those lines, or stumble into an audience that was just out there waiting for us somehow.
That probably won't happen based on my experience. So, but here's the thing that's interesting, right? So what's almost implicit in reading between the lines and what you're saying is that it's not growing more than because you're not dedicating the time and effort into it, right? So it's like, it's just like, it's like, lifting or fitness or anything else or shooting or crochet. Like, the more you do it, the more results and outcomes you'll get. So it's almost like you're in a place where you offer, a dozen classes a year, and you have the built-in audience of the Atomic Gym. But yeah, you're not advertising. I mean, this is something that is very much advertisable on, YouTube, Instagram, like different advertising platforms. And it's not something that you guys are choosing to do now. And again, that's a choice, right? And it's a valid choice. I was trying to get into like how you think about that and what are the, and you have your full-time job, right? So you have to be mindful of that. So that's got to be, you probably grapple with that, right?
Absolutely. And I can't speak for my partners, but one of the aspects I grapple with is if we try to reach out to a larger audience, a lot of times, in my experience at least, for the kinds of things that we offer, online marketing tends to promote a sort of, for lack of a better description, high-speed product. Like, come out to this class, you're going to learn how to put tourniquets on, and wound pack, and live fire, and over here we've got some flashbangs going off, and it's like, that's all potentially doable on my end, but involves a lot more work and less fun. And also, for better or worse, has the potential to attract audiences that we don't necessarily agree with.
The Rambos.
Right. And so, in the past, I've always sort of justified that in my mind as, well, you're not going to hurt anybody doing medical on them, right? You're not going to become a douchier person by learning how to respond to a medical situation. The world will only be better off the more people know how to render aid, right? But when it comes to the firearms instruction specifically, we weigh that a lot. And it's also, as I said, right now, the way it's set up for us, it's fun. It makes it very enjoyable for me to come in and teach a small group, of 8 to 16 people medical for an 8-hour period, which is, if I was doing that every day, I would be exhausted, and it wouldn't be fun anymore.
Well, you probably hire more people and there's like much more.
And I should point out that we get occasional, not often, but occasional sort of contracted gigs through Legion. For example, in August, I'm going to be teaching a large corporation's dignitary protection detail medical response for several days.
Okay.
So that's a pretty large boost to the money that comes into Legion, which is still pretty insignificant on a
right. So that's
level,
that's a big potential well of business, right? So you're training the security people of a large corporation who protect the executive team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're the ones who go out and do executive protection, usually in foreign countries and places like that.
Places where they're liable to get
where there's hazards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Wow. That would seem like a big opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other people who do this nationwide? Are there other people that I mean, to me, it was the first time. I mean, and I'm somebody who kind of seeks this kind of stuff. Have you heard of BOSS, the Boulder Outdoor Survival School? Boulder, Utah, not Boulder, Colorado.
No.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit of a different thing. I'd love to have them on the show someday if anybody's listening from them. But my friend did it. You basically do like 10-day survival courses, but it's like, I mean, I'm gonna misquote it, but it's basically you get nothing. You get like, you get a knife, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you got to make your own shelter. You got to make your own like with things out there in like a very hostile environment in the desert, in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn how to do stuff. Right now, that's a little bit different. That's more like on the kind of survival, but like also connected with nature front. And then there's also like on the other end, there's people for whom survival means stocking up on lots of stuff and having lots of backpacks with lots of molly on it.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about in terms of the wilderness program is fundamentally exactly what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming more confident and capable in yourself and able to operate, as a human in a variety of environments, without noticeably impeding yourself over much.
Yeah.
They sent me to survival school when I was 14, for 3 weeks. And it was a really formative experience in my life.
I bet.
For sure.
I bet. Probably informed a lot of things you do to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Can you think of a time when things went really wrong in your business, and what did you do about it?
I'm not sure there's been things that went wrong in terms of us trying to promote a class or an event, and having such limited participation for it that we cancel.
Yeah.
You know, that's happened several times for us.
Yeah.
And we're still not sure if it's because of the nature of the product being offered or just because we haven't reached out to the right audience for it yet, you know. But there's nothing, we haven't operated, I think, on a large enough scope or often enough that we've had any real major disasters yet.
Okay.
You know? No, certainly nobody I've ever taught medical to has ended up doing something horribly wrong. And
Sure. Well, I guess that's not even what I was thinking about. I was thinking from a business perspective. You know, so all businesses face. I mean, yeah, like planning a class and then not having enough to cover the cost of it. That's that's a big challenge.
Sure. But no, I think because of the very small scale that we operate on right now, we haven't really made ourselves liable to deal with those kinds of challenges.
How long have you guys been around for?
We've been operating now for, I want to say a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's fairly new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is still something that is developing. And what would it take for you to be? I mean, this is probably I guess something you grapple with. What would it take for you to be like, boom, we're doing this?
We're doing it. I think if we were able to even slowly grow to a point where I perceived an audience that was, significantly larger than the one we're dealing with right now, I think I could see a possibility for at least two, if not all three of us saying like, okay, now it's time for us to invest in a facility, all the things I already talked about, and see if we can do this full time. Because I think the skills, firearms aside, the rest of the skills that we teach or try to bring in instructors to teach are all widely applicable and probably pretty widely appealing if offered again to the right audience.
Could you do this in different cities?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think Tim Kennedy was here in town, who trains at Gracie Humaita, which Paula from Gracie has been on the show before. That's where my jiu-jitsu academy. He's got a thing called Sheepdog Response or something like that, right? Which is not quite the same, but has like some similar underpinnings, right? In terms of self-defense and all the things that he talks about, and he does them in different cities. Have you guys thought about doing that?
We haven't considered that yet because, unlike the model that Tim has promoted, and we know Tim, Tim has come out to the Vanguard and taught classes there, and we've talked with him about Sheepdog, and in fact, Jake and Alex both have done some instructing for Sheepdog before. Tim, I think, is promoting something that is similar on paper to what we do, but I think fundamentally different in some other ways, in that his focus tends to be primarily on self-defense and confrontation and things like that. And also, I think a lot of Sheepdog, from what I understand from Tim, is also based around the idea that he created that in the hopes of offering better funding and access and equipment to emergency responders in the States. And Tim also is amazingly good at promoting Tim Kennedy, and thus has access to a broad range of recognizable faces that he uses to make Sheepdog, more visually apparent in the cities that he goes to. For us, that, because there's only three of us, I think that would be an untenable model at this point. What I would see down the road would be that if we grew to a certain level, we would begin bringing in other instructors that we trust, and having them work off the curriculums that we've created, and that would enable us to go more national, and travel more extensively and bring it to other people.
Now, to flip it around, you do have people who come in from other cities to come to the Vanguard, right? So what percentage of people would you say are from out of town?
Oh, Man, I'd have to ask.
It's like 10, 20% or something like
Yeah,
that?
probably something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have people coming in. I know the guy that does the blog, The Art of Manliness, came
Brett.
in and did he did an article on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a real pleasure to have out there.
That's awesome. If people are interested in learning more about Atomic Legion, where can people find you? So what are you guys have some social media presence and websites. What are your the places where people can find out more?
So the website is www.atomiclegion.com. Mm-hmm. And then we've got a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and I think that's all we have right now. None of us are super great at online promotion and marketing and things like that. Mm-hmm. And personally, I kind of came to a point several months ago where I was really a little bit repulsed by social media. Mm-hmm. And so I don't even go on my personal pages anymore. I only occasionally access the Atomic Legion pages to advise people of something cool or an event coming up, right? But those are the places to find us for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's it's interesting because I also have some of those same feelings, and then also it is an important part of promoting the business and getting the word out there. So that's a conflict, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I've heard it different. I mean, you can think about it as a skill, just like any of the other skills you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, actually, it's really no different than some of the other things you're talking about, like people being intimidated by, like firearms. Mm-hmm. It's just a different type of firearm.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it for sure.
Well, Justin Hurzeler, it's been a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
Pablo, absolutely, man.
Yeah, and look forward to getting schooled at the gym soon.
I look forward to seeing you there.
All right, take care.
Thanks, man.
Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.